And today's custom budget PC is fitted into this Cougar MX331-T PC case. I've built into this case a few times and I've always liked the look of it. It has kind of a spaceship vibe and looks like something out of maybe like Star Trek. There's a tempered glass panel up front, and I installed two ARGB Thermalright case fans for air intake. And you can see there's an RGB strip that kind of lines its way around the fans, and that's actually controlled by a button up here on the case. Now, although the look is really cool, it's not the best for cooling. These aren't actually air intakes, that's solid glass. The main air intake is actually underneath down here. Over here on the front I/O, we have 2x USB 2.0, microphone and headphone jacks, that LED button I mentioned earlier, and 2x USB 3 ports. And up here, there's a grill for some passive air cooling, but you could also install maybe a 2-fan AIO radiator. There's a pretty thick tempered glass side panel on right now. Let's take that off and get a better look at the case inside. And the CPU cooler is a Thermalright Assassin King 120 mini white with a 120mm ARGB case fan. And I had to choose some RGB effects because, as you can see, on this motherboard we have some RGB accents that are printed on the back. So we got to go with that RGB ambiance. So speaking of the motherboard, this is an AsRock B460M Pro 4S-AC motherboard with Wi-Fi. Probably the fanciest thing about it is that RGB on the back. Otherwise, we do have some expansion. There's a short PCIe lane up here for small cards and a full-size PCIe lane down here. There's our Wi-Fi card right here in an M.2 slot. And underneath the CPU cooler is an Intel Core i5-10400 CPU with 6 cores and 12 threads. Beside that, we have 16 gigabytes of Timetec branded 3200 MHz RAM. Although this RAM is 3200 MHz, it is running at a frequency of 2666, and that's because with this i5 CPU, we are locked at those speeds. If we had an i7 or an i9, I believe we could ramp it up to the full 3200 MHz. And this will be the MSI RTX 3060 Ti Ventus 2X OCV1 graphics card with 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. And as we can see on the Tech Power Up website, there is a small boost in clock speeds. Now there's actually two M.2 ports for SSDs, and one is covered by the graphics card and the other one is occupied by a Timetec MS09, a 512GB NVMe solid state drive running at PCIe 3x4 speeds. And back to that Wi-Fi card, that's an Intel dual band wireless AC 3168. And judging by the specifications here, it's a fairly basic Wi-Fi card. Maybe not the best, especially when comparing to Wi-Fi 6 and 7 these days. However, in a pinch, it'll do. I really like how this case looks. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same way. And if you think I should have also installed an ARGB fan as a rear exhaust, instead of this plain looking Corsair fan that I installed. I'm keeping to a budget though, so nothing's better than free sometimes. And you can't see it underneath this power supply shroud, but I have one here. Powering the system is an FSP 650 watt power supply. And before anybody says anything negative, FSP is a very common brand and totally safe to use. It doesn't hurt that it's 80 bronze certified, and I've seen FSP power supplies in numerous OEM Lenovo builds over the last like 10-15 years. I actually have a small form factor one over here, powering some case fans that I'm experimenting with doing some dust collection. Onto the rear I/O of the motherboard, we have a mouse and keyboard PS2 port, 2x USB 2.0, one HDMI port, and we have some Wi-Fi antenna. And there's one USB-C that is 3.2 Gen 1, and 4x USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A. Gigabit RJ45 Ethernet port, audio jacks, and the 3060 Ti has 1x HDMI 2.1 and 3x DisplayPort 1.4a. And now that we know about the hardware inside this PC case, let's do some tests. First, we'll check out some video rendering with DaVinci Resolve 19 and video encoding with Handbrake 1.9.0. And I decided to make some bar charts for these tests because I've tested out several i5-10400 CPUs over the last couple months with a variety of graphics cards, And we can see that today the 3060 Ti is coming out on top with the lowest video render times, and surprisingly the GTX 1080 Ti, under very similar circumstances, came out with the slowest time. And over here for the Handbrake CPU test, now I was thinking that the choice of GPU won't have much of an impact, but for some reason we are seeing a variance in times. We can see that the combination with the 1660 Super came out on top, and that 1080 Ti build is still taking the longest. And onto the Handbrake GPU encoding test, we can see that the 3060 Ti came out on top again, and that 1080 Ti is still going slow. Even though it's an older card, I thought the 11GB of VRAM would come in handy for some workstation tasks like this, but we're seeing cards with even 6GB of VRAM doing better time, and 8GB doing even better. Once again, I'd like to thank you for checking out my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you learned something. We're mainly a group of passionate enthusiasts over here at Haste Computer Repair, so if there's any educational outcome at all, that's awesome. So feel free to check in the comments if you're using a setup like this in 2025. Otherwise, again, thanks a lot for watching, and here we go with the gameplay footage.